there's so much gold in these CRMs, people don't really know how to access from top down that I built my career off of. What a lot of these folks are trying to do is trying to identify these companies before they go out and decide to sell their business, because that would be a prime opportunity to make the connection, make the relationship. Those are the opportunities that they're really looking for, to build that, establish that relationship. He just kind of tucked me behind him. He said, why don't you just stand behind me? I don't want the whole beard in front of the whole video. As we logged in, you see all these videos turning on one after another. And lo and behold, every single one of them, Duck Dynasty beards. He very gently just brushes himself to the side and just pushes me to the front.
Welcome to The Growth Switch, the podcast where we dive into the strategies, struggles, and breakthroughs of bold business leaders. I'm your host, Jules Fox, the growth strategist and lead content creator at Aries Media. I'm here to uncover how today's top brands are scaling, overcoming challenges, and unlocking sustainable success. Now, for those of you just tuning in, Aries Media helps grow successful brands like yours with comprehensive hands-on support for sales, business development, and performance marketing. Go ahead and drop growth into the comments if you want to learn how to do that. Now, today, we are fortunate enough to have Raphael Mahpour. He's a high-impact sales leader and growth strategist with deep expertise in financial intelligence for private markets. He's currently helping organizations like yours uncover hidden business opportunities through PrivCo's data-driven insights. Raphael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. All right. So, I guess I need to address the elephant in the room. You have over 780,000 private companies in PrivCo's database. So what surprising trends are you seeing emerge in the private market that most investors or business leaders are completely missing right now?
Sure. So there's a lot of companies that get attention because they're raising their hand up in the air and saying, hey, find me, look at me. And those are oftentimes the ones that are showing up at conferences. Perhaps they're part of a portfolio from a private equity standpoint. There are a lot of businesses, actually the majority of businesses in the private sector, that are non-PE, non-VC backed. And a lot of them are just completely hidden. And that has a lot of ramifications, whether it's from a sourcing perspective for an acquisition target, or whether it's simply business acceleration, you're trying to find additional targets to reach out to for your own business. There's a lot of missed opportunities that are just sitting right there in the open.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me backtrack for just 1 second. So, all right, you've got all these opportunities. What was the vision for the company? Well, tell me about the origin of PrivCo.
So we started about 15 or so years ago, actually by a late founder, Sam Hamade. And, he was actually one of the co-founders of Vault previous to that. There's a lot of research being done, especially on the academia side. And what essentially happened was, once that was sold off, PrivCo was started by two brothers. And, essentially what we've done is we build out, through a lot of custom research and bespoke research for our clients, we built out this database of company profiles after a while. And it's become searchable and scannable, and everything that's kind of encompassing there is published in the database. But in addition to that, we're still doing, custom research, and we're still adding those profiles every day.
Yeah. Now, why is this useful to the people who need this information?
So I would throw it back at you and ask you, who's it not useful for, right? So I think it's interesting that every day we get inquiries for the most obscure use cases. And it's fascinating to me. It keeps things not stale, right? But in general, like the standard use cases are going to be private equity for investment bankers who are M&A professionals, corporate development, who are really focused on the acquisition of companies, because it's crucial to understand the financial makeup and the health of the companies. But we're getting inquiries all the time. And an additional good, healthy part of our business is from other use cases as well. So, top 4 accounting firms are all our clients. We work on with librarians in many different divisions, such as law firms and other institutions. So there's a lot of use cases. I would say the ones that don't necessarily fit our business model, but are still interesting, is somebody just wondering, hey, how much is my business worth? I'd like to just look at my own business profile, or maybe get information on the top few competitors, which we try to help out sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, I instantly saw the value in all of the use cases for it. But yeah, sometimes people just tuning in, they definitely want to know, like, how could they use this for their business? So I think that's really insightful. So, I mean, I guess let's think of it this way. Like, what stories can data tell? Because for a lot of people, they just look at the data and they don't know what to do with it. I mean, especially people who are not data scientists. But it's much more than being a data scientist and saying, well, this means this, X means Y. I think a lot of times there's a story behind the actual numbers. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love the approach. A lot of folks, I'm learning things every single day, right? So a lot of the approaches people take are very unique, and they're looking for a specific data set that would explain to them something that is maybe not apparent right away.
Mhm.
I'll give an example. There's a major generational transfer happening of wealth in the next decade. And so a lot of these companies, for example, if they've already gone to the bidding process with their banker, it's often too late for maybe less competitive PE or investors. So what a lot of these folks are trying to do is trying to identify these companies before they go out and decide to sell their business, because that would be a prime opportunity to make the connection, make the relationship. Those are the opportunities that they're really looking for to build that, establish that relationship. That's where PrivCo can oftentimes help out, and that's what they're seeking by utilizing certain type of criteria and filters. So they may, for example, look at companies that are at least 30 years old. They
Mhm.
would look at, isolate companies that are non-VC, non-PE backed. And so they would be able to identify the most likely folks that would be selling their business without actually seeing somebody raise their hand and say, we're ready to sell.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting that, you're talking about a relationship, developing this relationship. A lot of times in sales, we're just going for like that, the low hanging fruit, the people who are just with their hand up waiting to buy, which is like 4% of the market. But developing that relationship long beforehand, like almost a pipeline of relationships, that's pretty brilliant that your people are using this tool to develop these relationships long before they actually do wish to make a purchase.
Yeah, you'd be surprised doing a little bit more research on a company, just getting a better understanding of what the financial health is, get a better understanding of the income statement. Where aim is directional accuracy. So as long as you get within the ballpark figure, that's more than enough to start a conversation. And so if somebody comes in to a potential prospect, potential client, potential acquisition target, and just mentions, hey, I've done a little research on your company and also the top 5 competitors in the area, let's have a conversation, have a coffee, as opposed to, hey, I like golf, you like golf. I see, you're 6'1", I'm tall as well. Let's have lunch, right? Obviously, in the sense where people like to do business with other people that have commonalities, that's obviously understandable and that's still real. But at the same time, people also appreciate when you take interest in something that they developed and spent almost their entire life building. And so when you have a lot of substantial information and background on that company and their direct competitors, that opens a whole new world of conversation and hopefully leads to a productive conversation.
Yeah, super clear. That makes sense to me. I mean, people do like to do business with people who are similar to themselves, which kind of reminds me of the epic beard story. Do you want to tell that story on the podcast?
Oh, sure. Claim to fame. We were talking before we started this one about the beard in the corporate settings. In a previous company, I had the VP just constantly asking me, when are you going to shave that beard? You're in front of prospects, in front of clients, and just wouldn't have it any other way. And he even invited me over to we had a joint call. It was a Zoom, and he asked me to sit behind him so the beard wouldn't be directly in front of the camera and perhaps jeopardize something. I'm not sure what he was worried about. But in any case, it was a company in Arkansas, headquartered in Arkansas. The gentlemen all showed up one at a time, turning on their cameras in the Zoom meeting. And lo and behold, you had all these Duck Dynasty beards just populating the screen. And he ever so slightly just started scooting his chair to the side and brought me forward and used my beard as a icebreaker, which turned out to be the largest deal in the company had sold that year, maybe ever, where that relationship developed to. So I had bragging rights from then on that the beard is not going anywhere.
Yeah. And it also makes me think like your career has been built challenging certain sales norms, right? And I feel like the beard is kind of like you could say a figurative representation of that. But what are some of the outdated sales beliefs that are still holding companies back from unlocking their real revenue growth that you see that people should be doing today?
Oh my God, you hit the nail on the head here. This is something I'm passionate about, right?
Yeah.
So I come from Silicon Valley, and my background is very technological. I had many opportunities to join stealth startups as a key figure, co-founder, CEO, and I dabbled with that a bit, but ultimately realized that everybody, number one, feels like they're the next Mark Zuckerberg or Sergey Brin in Silicon Valley, and also people have challenges with selling out there. And so I realized that the growth aspect was going to be a challenge for me if I were to try to run these businesses. And so I moved out to New York and tried to learn from the folks that have the reputation of selling. And I fell in love with the process, but I came from it from an outsider. I didn't come from necessarily a sales background. I came from a very technological background, family engineers. And what ended up happening was that approach ended up working because what I would often do is I would just start with the CRM.
Hmm.
If you had
Hmm.
any decent marketing folk, you often find the same issue: marketing and sales not aligning, the CRM a mess, garbage in, garbage out. It's the same story you hear in many organizations, right?
Yeah.
The biggest, I think, challenge is not that people are not using the CRM correctly, it's that we're trying to make us work for technology, not technology working for us.
Mm.
And so you hear about these things about, the single source of truth, making sure that everything is in the CRM, making sure that if it didn't have it happen in the CRM, it never happened. And the reality is, it's okay to use a spreadsheet. And let me put a big caveat on that. It's important to keep the information in the CRM so you have organization and accessibility. But if you're only working out of a CRM, you oftentimes you lose visibility and you lose sight. And I think that's on for the folks on the ground, on the troops on the boots on the ground. You have to work with them. You have to meet them halfway. That being said, there's so much gold in these CRMs that, again, people don't really know how to access from top down, that I built my career off of that. I'll give
Yeah.
you one example: Twitter, right? So before it was X, we basically working for outside sales and marketing firm, and we had the opportunity, wonderful opportunity, to launch a sales team for Twitter. It was about a handful of us, not even. We were starting from scratch, and the first thing I did was get access to the Salesforce instance. I said, I'm going to spend all night until they shut me down. I'm just going to go through everything, and basically I just found incredible opportunities of folks that people just ignored or missed, or it was an old rep that left. And, within 6 months, we already had about 6 million in revenue, just a handful of people, which was incredible for them. I mean, the relationship blew up, but in the most positive way, it expanded tremendously. But in a short period of time, you can understand that you can skip steps. You can understand how you can make a lot of moves just by looking at your CRM and identifying gaps, holes, blind sites. And from a technology perspective, that was a game changer, I think.
It's interesting. It sounds like the flip side of this, because in marketing, a lot of times we say, meet the people where they are, meet your audience where they are on the platform that they are. And it sounds like what you're saying is meet your team where they are, where they need to be. And if that's an in-person representation of what's in the CRM, then use that additionally, in addition to the CRM, so in other words, meet your team with the technology that they need to get their tasks done as well, right?
Yeah, it was always trying to get buy-in to utilize CRM. Look, I think I'm saying two separate things. I'm saying, number one, step away from technology and make technology work for you. And at the same time, I'm saying technology is where you're going to find the success. So
Yes.
it seems almost like a contradiction, but hear me out. So I would do presentations for my team with a bunch of cartoons and animations and just make technology fun and non-intimidating. If you look at our current Salesforce instance, where you have the different stages of an opportunity, I've embedded little images into like that line bar in Salesforce, which I haven't seen anybody else do. I don't think people realize you can do that. But literally, like if you hit a close one, there's like a basketball for like a slam dunk. I mean, just literally things that you could just enhance just the novelty and just the kind of the excitement of using the technology. But again, it's got to go down to the people level. So if you miss the point and you just kind of try to force everyone to adapt technology that they don't have the buy-in for, you're wasting time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're adding a bit of the fun factor and having the people want to use the technology versus telling them they want to use the technology. And that's very
Right.
different.
Right, exactly. And so, and also showing success, right? So I think in another firm, just we had integration with a marketing automation tool. And so this was actually tied to one of the other stories here, but there was this prospect that I had been calling every few months, and I had no idea who they were, honestly. I mean, I was following blindly the marketing automation tool that would score this prospect from viewing all these webinars. And I said, they must be somebody who's potentially worth talking to, because they're legitimately just consuming more and more information about our product, service offerings, and information that we're putting on webinars. But I had no idea. I mean, the way that the old rep had inputted that lead, it wasn't clear to me what that company was or what they did. I was very new to the firm, and honestly to that career. It ended up again being one of the largest deals in the company, because even though I didn't really have a value proposition for them, but they were self-educating and they were identifying themselves through this technology. Whereas otherwise, it didn't look like one of these large accounts that the VP of sales would say, you need to spend all your time chasing after this one. This would be a major deal, major logo for our website. None of the sort like that. It was completely blind. but I didn't really care about the size of a deal or anything like that. I was more focused on the data, right? So, and I guess it goes back to your original question: when did data really help you drive decisions? I ignored the logos, I ignored the net revenue of the companies early on in my career, and I just focused on who's engaged with our service, who's engaged with our offering, and that's really where I found success early on.
As a newcomer to the career, I think that maybe your brain was more engaged and you thought about it in a different way versus if you had been working in the field for quite some time, you may have already come up with an operational way in which you simply do things and not have come up with that creative way in which to interpret that new information and engage with that client.
Yeah. Look, process is extremely important. Once you get on a roll and you understand who your ideal customer profile is and you start to build the use cases, it is important to follow a certain process. But you also have to challenge it. You also have to ask, what can we do differently? And always, always constantly revisit that approach and that strategy. I think a lot of it just depends on having conversations with your existing clients. That's probably the most direct way, understanding their use case, understanding what brought them to you and what we're solving for them. That's going to be just really the, as you call, the low hanging fruit in terms of building out additional growth as well.
Yeah. So walk me through as people are watching and listening to this podcast, walk me through who the ideal client would be who might work with you.
Sure. So we serve these profiles both in a couple different consumption models, both API and a SaaS platform. So based off of the way that we can provide the data, we have different use cases that most definitely fit. We have a lot of consultancies, advisories, private equity, again, like I mentioned before, as well as corporate development individuals that are looking for this kind of data for acquisition purposes. We also have for key investors, venture capital as well, that are looking for to provide some additional capital and want to see a little bit more about what that marketing landscape looks like. In terms of the use cases, though, it does vary quite broadly. We even have an entire academia division that we're supporting everything from the top tier universities all the way across to the community colleges, are very big proponents of democratizing private company data. And so while, again, a lot of the numbers are modeled and estimates, we also do have individual direct data that we're able to identify from a lot of different sources. So just bringing a lot of transparency to an otherwise extremely opaque market where there's a lot more attention on the private side now, especially given all the turbulence with the public markets. A lot of investors want to go upstream, and they're often looking at PrivCo for that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, to find these people, I know that marketing for your own company can sometimes be a challenge. If you wanted to 10x the growth of the company over the next few years, 2 to 5 years, what's the number one thing? What's the number one roadblock that the company is facing right now that you would like to plow through that hurdle?
It's interesting. Even after about 15 years, I think there's still a challenge with the ICP and understanding exactly the type of firm, let's say. I'll give you an example. You have one private equity firm that's of similar size or similar mandate that they're going through. And coming to us for proprietary sourcing, looking to identify the deals and skip the whole bidding process with investment bankers, potentially maybe for an add-on that they're trying to utilize, maybe a platform to find these smaller companies that wouldn't otherwise be available through an existing portfolio of a private equity firm. Mm-hmm. It's a perfect fit. Right. So we're able to show them the platform. They're able to get a few emails out. They start making connections in the certain areas that they're visible in. And so we jump up with joy. Hey, we made this perfect match. Let's go ahead and find a similar private equity firm that has a similar use case. And then the next one we come across, we'll say, hey, we're an old-fashioned, handshaking, golf-playing firm. We don't send out emails. We don't do technology. We're just classic guys. This is probably not something we would ever utilize. And it's interesting because it'll literally it can go both ways. That's an interesting one that we've come across.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the first telltale sign. If you're talking about being customer focused or, kind of thinking of value for other folks before yourself.
Yeah.
I think it starts with these small indicators, like when you're proposing a time.
Yeah.
Just, hey, I'm going to give you my time and you're going to have to figure it out. That should tell you something, right? Like where your head is at.
Yep.
It's something to be present about.
It's true. I mean, that sounds like a small detail. I think it's not. I think that that small detail is if you say that you are a client facing company and that you do that, that's just you're saying it. But if you actually do it, like in that small first moment, because these first moments like define you, these first moments define your interaction with the person, right? So if you say that, like, oh, yeah, we're good with customers, but if you actually do it and you take that extra moment that it takes to like work on their terms and help them out where they meet them where they are, that completely redefines the relationship. And I think that gives people like, oh, yeah, no, these people are serious. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, good people are going to be rewarded. Just being able to focus on that. How does data fall into it? Well, you got to just ask yourself, what is the data serving other people, or is data serving your own interests and needs? Looking at it could be a similar approach. What I'm going to do is I'm going to understand, hey, I just spoke to my client. He's having a lot of success. They're using the platform to get great data for what specific their mandate is. I want to be able to find similar folks, similar institutions, similar firms. They're going to have the most success because I understand their use case now. And so what you can do from there is you always look at all the different indicators, all the different signals of that company. How do you size up that company, right? Are you just looking at the bottom line revenue? Are you looking at the industry? Are you looking at the size of the company, right? So all these different filters are extremely helpful to better understand who you can help benefit from what you're offering.
Mm-hmm.
So what I might do is I might go in and say, this is a company that has a certain growth rate. Maybe they're hurting a little bit, right? Or I might go in and say, this is a specific industry, but really understand that industry. So what's interesting about what we're doing at PrivCo is we've completely done away with the NAICS codes, codes, and we're moved into a modern classification taxonomy. And so what happens is a lot of times you miss the beat when you're trying to find a company within a certain sector or subsector because it doesn't fit within those particular codes or because you're not able to identify it from a industry list. You'll see a lot of these companies that are expanding their horizons, having multiple streams of revenue, incorporating different types of product, service, or offerings that don't necessarily match. And so if you only have one classification number or sector, then you miss that. And so what we've done is we've actually incorporated a bunch of keywords that overlay on top of the subsector. And what that does is it actually helps you identify other product services or offerings of the company that wouldn't otherwise fall under the main subsector. So we found a lot of success with that with our clients. They're often using that taxonomy and the classifications that we incorporate into the business profiles. And that's pretty unique. And yeah, I think that's a big one for us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, awesome. I think that's pretty clever stuff. I think that every company is out there trying to figure out what they're doing different, and it sounds like you're actually doing it in a different way, a different enough way to where it's a very unique, service product.
Right. Folks will ask, okay, private company data. So how do you get it? Right.
Yeah, of course.
And that's, reasonably so. That's a great question to ask. So, first of all, by definition, private company data is private, right? So, a lot of the data, like I mentioned before, is going to be modeled. But the question is, so how do you get even directionally accurate? Because even to get to that point, when you can compare one company to the next and you have a reference point, could be all the difference between chasing after someone you have no business chasing after, and then finally having that conversation and ending up with egg on the face because you assumed certain things about the size of the company and you were totally off, right? Mm-hmm. That happens even at that very high sophisticated level of the investment bankers, for example. They don't like that.
Yeah.
So how do you get the level of confidence to be able to put out some of these numbers here? Well, it's got to make sense. I can just tell you technology, right? Or sophisticated individuals behind all this, but the base and the core has to make sense. And that's one of the starting points is the classifications. So if you're able to obtain data on a specific company and you have a very clear understanding how to classify this company, well, then if you get enough of those, you can absolutely draw inferences to other companies that have a very similar classifications. Granted, you adjust for this employee size and other aspects that would make impact. But for the most part, theoretically, it has to make sense. Mm-hmm. There's also the obtaining of data. So folks think, well, I just use Google and I can find, plenty of information. Well, they forget the fact that number one, a lot of the things that are on Google have just come off, right? Companies shut down. They're not searchable anymore. The information is irrelevant. Company websites or even media outlets have kind of moved away from hosting their data in a public sense. Maybe it's gated by paywalls now. So what you end up having is a lot of data that's since been either removed or not accessible now that we have grabbed at that time completely legally. And we now have that in our database, in our data warehouse, in our backend. So we use that raw data in order to draw more extrapolations for companies that maybe are not relevant for that company specifically, but we're able to use that data in a very sophisticated way to help bring extrapolations for other companies.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. I mean, I think that's that answers a lot of questions that people would have of like, okay, you guys have this USP, this unique sales proposition, but how do you do it?
Right.
All right. So how can people connect with you? I'm going to put all of the links down below. If you're listening, if you're watching, just go ahead and look down below. You're going to find all the good links to connect. But go ahead and walk me through those links, how people can best find and connect with you.
Sure. You can go ahead and find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Raphy, Raphy. Simple enough. And, we can kind of set up a time. You follow me that way. I'm always up for a call or a chat. Yeah. I mean, I guess we can put on some websites on there as well and reach out to us directly at PrivCo.
Raphael, it was so fantastic meeting with you, having a chat today. I really appreciate your time and energy. Thank you.
Likewise. Appreciate the time.